For those who have just joined us, I'd like to welcome you to this Institute of Internal Auditors 60-minute session, IT Service Continuity and the Link with Business Continuity, presented by Rinske Gerlings. Now, for those who don't know Rinske is an internationally known and award-winning consultant, speaker, and certified trainer in business continuity, IT management, disaster recovery, risk management, and information security, with 20 years global experience. Her firm, Business as Usual, has successfully competed against the Big Four to work with prestigious clients, including 9 central banks, BBC Worldwide, Toll, Shell, Lonely Planet, Boeing, Fiji Xerox, Fujitsu, St. George's Bank, NIB, Toga, ASIC, Departments of Defense, Immigration, Health, Industry, Education for Foreign Affairs, and hundreds of other mid-size and large organizations worldwide. Rinske has trained over thousands of professionals and presented in front of tens of thousands of conference delegates across industries and geographic locations. She's built her hands-on experience during permanent roles in banking and played an active role on the Finance Forum regarding the APRA standard for business continuity. Great to have you here today, Rinske. Rinske, I'm about to open up your mic. Good afternoon.
Hey, Michael. Good afternoon.
There we go. I'll pass control to you. Enjoy the session, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Well, welcome everybody to this webinar. It's great to see you coming from all different parts of the planet, almost, from Wellington all the way to Adelaide, and Perth. I see here as well. So Iceland, I see here. So yeah, it's really, really exciting. I mean, the whole topic of business continuity management, it's a global topic. Every region has its own challenges, its own risks, and we've seen many of those eventuating over the years. So yeah, what I'm going to share with you is the common methodologies that I've experienced while doing this work globally. We've got a team of freelance consultants all over the world now, and that's from Latin America to East Africa to Europe, Southeast Asia, and then obviously Australia and New Zealand. I'm based in Sydney myself, where I run the business from since 10 years. And we see actually very common issues, not so much common risks, but common issues in managing business continuity plans, service continuity plans. The common sort of challenges are there, and I'm going to share some of those with you, and obviously some solutions that I think would apply in those situations. So please fire away with your questions through the chat box. If you have any during the presentation, I'll probably see if it's relevant to comment straight away, or if I can group a few for the end. But I'm definitely looking forward to your feedback. Please let us know, especially that Iceland person. I'm very keen to hear from that person as well. So let's get started. You can see here some slides, just a bit of background on the organization that I'm now part of. It's run since 2006 from Sydney, but like I said, globally. We do a lot of work in business continuity, disaster recovery, risk management, also information security, ISO 27001 type work these days. And my personal interest is a lot in training people, capacity building, in-house training, facilitating senior management teams and executive teams and boards in actually making the right decisions on what risk is acceptable. So risk appetite, and then quantifying that down the line to people who have to implement the controls, like IT people, for example, who are then get better guided in terms of what that organization can handle in terms of disruption and risk and business impact. So that's where the real challenges come in, because yeah, what I find is most organizations don't have all of that clear, and it's often done by people's gut feel and senior management sort of trying to get their head around on how to quantify some of these thresholds and that. So that's where the recent trends are going, and that links a lot to ISO 31000 and risk management standards like that. You can see a few other standards and frameworks that we often deal with. ITIL, Service Continuity Management, is one of my background sort of pieces of knowledge. COVID, especially the COVID DSS4, the continuity of service. So those standards are quite important when we're doing service continuity work. And obviously business continuity locally in Australia, where quite a few of you are from, the APRA standard, which is the Prudential Regulation Authority standard for business continuity management. We work a lot with that, and also the ISO 22301. So as you can see, we do a bit of training under the PECB umbrella, the global provider of certification and evaluation of people, not so much of companies, but more of people. So that's been really fun, including that certification into our practical training programs for business continuity, for risk management, and so on. Okay, a couple of slides just showing, not to impress anybody, it's just to show that all our work is done across all these industries with our common methodology. So whether we are working for government departments or agencies, banking, finance, insurance, IT, telcos, manufacturing, and so on, education, hospitality, retail, or other industries, we have a set of best practices that we actually tailor and tweak for each of those industries. And yeah, with the right experts involved, we basically make the process work. So I will share some of that knowledge with you, and I hope you can translate it to your organization, whether it's big or small, whether it's corporate or whether it's more a sort of a public organization, that you can use these tips and tricks. So this is my personal background. You can see I'm a member of a lot of different things. The Institute of Auditors, I actually was a member until last year. I haven't yet renewed, so I thought, let me not lie, but I will renew as soon as I get the reminder. The Institute of Auditors has been in my realm of relationship for a long time. I've done a lot of master classes for the IIA in Australia in different locations. And also spoken at the SOPAC conference numerous times, run workshops. So Institute of Auditors is just a very important network in my realm. And you can see here the Risk Management Institute of Australia, ISACA, and the ITSMF is also quite prominent. It's not listed here, but that's also a prominent network in my world. So that's where I share some of this knowledge and also gain it. So, a little poll. That was enough about me. What about yourself? What's your answer? I work in IT, I work in security, I work in the business, in one of the departments in the business, or I'm a consultant, or the last answer, anything else. Could we please see a bit of a virtual show of hands? Where are you guys coming from?
Now I've opened that poll. Don't forget to click submit so we can get those results, and thanks.
I'll get started on the next slide, and while you guys are submitting your results, we're going to have a quick revisit, because it's important, to see where what your background is. If you're coming from more the IT service continuity or more the business or the business continuity side, I can tailor the later stages of this webinar a little bit to that. So it would be helpful for you guys to click that. It'd be great to see what you are all doing on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so topics that I would like to cover in this webinar: how to build or review your organization is based on COVID ISO standards in terms of disaster recovery, service continuity plans, DIA, and results related to that. Achieving best practice alignment or integration between service continuity with common BCM, planning for assessments, audits, and benchmarking initiatives, and presenting findings and recommendations to senior management. We can see here a little bit of a result coming through. A lot of you, more than half so far, are working in business departments, consultants about 10%, anything else 34%, and not that many in IT and security. So that's interesting. Either those people are too busy to respond, which I can imagine, or you're just coming from different areas in the organizations. Now, anything else, I'm assuming there could be auditors, obviously, but I've found quite a lot of auditors also come from an IT background. So I'm sure that you've got some crossover in different skill sets. So what are some of the key reasons to do business continuity and IT disaster recovery and service continuity properly? It's not just about when a disaster strikes, because most people really, even though things are happening every day and you see them in the news, most organizations and key managers or even, the staff, it's hard to imagine that tomorrow when you turn up at work, something is going to be disrupted and the building is inaccessible or the systems are down. Most people expect things to be sort of smooth sailing. Now, in that event, if that's the general sort of perception of most people in your organization, you might need to pull out some different reasons why people need to do BCP and IT disaster recovery. So especially if you're an auditor, you're going to need potentially these reasons. Okay, the first one, cheaper insurance. If you have good business continuity plans, service continuity plans, and disaster recovery provisions, you can, especially in long-term relationships with your insurance company, you can start negotiating better deals and better premiums when it comes to especially business interruption insurance. Now, that's important for quite a significant number of industries like hospitality, retail, manufacturing, transport, they tend to be the industries that have a lot of this kind of insurance, business interruption insurance. And it's important to keep that in mind because it will potentially create the complete influx of savings that you need to run your next business continuity or service continuity initiative. So that can be a really good reason to do that. Then the next one, the next reason, I'm clicking, but I'm having some trouble getting the next picture up. Here it is, stakeholder confidence. So if you have a good continuity plan, well, if you have a good business continuity plan, you can impress customers, suppliers, other stakeholders or shareholders. If you've got a good service continuity plan, you can impress your internal customers, who are the business departments, etc. If things get disrupted, you know where to go, what to do, how to communicate to them. That gives confidence to people. Compliance. So APRA, third party, that may be the reason. Now, there's a little thing I'd like to mention here, that compliance or the stick approach is not going to cut it in most environments. I really believe in the carrot and the stick. So the carrot being the immediate benefits, like, for example, the cheaper insurance or getting better results when you're submitting tender responses, like stakeholder confidence, remember the previous little picture. So, yeah, I would say the pure reason being compliance can also create a real problem. Just like many of you auditors would know, if you're just using compliance, people will try to avoid your process a little bit too, or they're not there when the audit happens, and so on. So we want to actually bring in some more warm and fuzzy reasons why people want to do good business continuity planning. The next one is better decision making. Many, many provisions are these days available for continuity planning, and they are not cheap. Real-time replication of data, immediate availability of seating for staff, Citrix availability for hundreds of staff members remotely. These things are costly. So if you're doing proper business continuity planning, you will do proper impact analysis and identifying what are actually the key things that you're going to have to put in place and what is the justifications for those. So you're going to make better decisions and make it more suitable in terms of your organization that you're investing well in the right things and not over or under investing. The next one is competitive advantage. I spoke about stakeholder confidence. This is where it can get really tangible. Some organizations put on their website that they've got a great continuity process. That means that, hey, if you do business with us, we're here for the long run. And we're here also when there's something that impacts on our business. So you can use that also when you're responding to tenders or requests for tenders. You can use BCP. In fact, if you want to do business with a bank or insurance company or a superannuation fund in Australia, or even in countries like Iceland, where regulation is prevalent, if you want to do business with a regulated institution, you often get asked, what is your BCP? So we get calls from all sorts of walks of life. It could be dry cleaning companies, it could be law firms, accounting firms. They want to do business with a, let's say, bank. The bank is asking them for their BCP because it's part of their third-party compliance. So it's not just for those regulated institutions anymore. Okay, next picture, better day-to-day business. Now that is all about having a plan for the big disasters. Is going to help you also be prepared for the day-to-day, week-to-week, smaller disasters. So if you've done good business impact analysis, which is one of the activities in BCP, if you know who's impacted by which particular resources, by which particular applications, if you bring down one of those, let's say on the weekend because you want to do some maintenance, if you're in IT, well, it's good to know because for that little small disruption, you also know who are the impacted departments or individuals or business processes. So it makes your day-to-day business easier if you have plans for the big dramas as well. There are some of the immediate benefits of business continuity. Now you might recognize some of these things. When a business continuity or DR test is suggested, staff always seem to be busy with high priority day-to-day activities. We're rolling out a new product to the customers, or we're doing some marketing campaigns, or we're actually upgrading a system. We're not going to do a DR test now. So that's a very, very common statement and common problem in globally, I'd say. BCP procedures are published on your organization's intranet, and also in employment contracts, but if you surveyed a few staff, you would find people quickly forget it's not front of mind. So if the building is suddenly inaccessible and that people turn up, they don't know where to go. They often forget what was the procedure that they were trained in when they first joined the organization. Okay, another one, a business unit not turning up at the annual business continuity exercise. Yeah, especially sometimes the ones that are really time critical and really important, they also tend to be fairly confident, or they think, we're not going to turn up on a Saturday and do this silly business continuity test because I've got other things to do. I've got to take my kids to the school sport or something. Well, that's often a real problem because they will be critical, potentially, to the other business areas that are also part of the same end-to-end process. So it's a very, very common challenge that we deal with, is to get that buy-in from every single part of the business. Now, one way to do that buy-in is obviously planning those exercises at suitable timings and also really letting those business departments selling the concept to each other. And I really feel for auditors in many, many situations because it's hard to go around with the stick or pushing people. It's much easier if they push each other because they actually see that without one department functioning in business continuity situations, the others also can't function. So I think that's one of the things you could try and do. So the last one is when presenting a proposal to optimize the off-site facility or DR site, the board wonders why to invest money in a dead site. Very common syndrome when you have redundant services or redundant provisions. Many senior managers would see that as a cost, waste of cost every day, and when are we ever going to see the returns? So that's quite a common issue that we find in those situations. Okay, there's a few questions coming through the chat field. I'll answer some of those in a minute. The next slide will show you a few other mistakes and misconceptions. People thinking, we're all in the same boat when it comes to disasters like pandemics and terrorism. The government will help us all. They will have a plan for everyone, and we're just going to all sit and wait. Well, that's not the case anymore. In fact, the government has expressed in many states of Australia that the first 72 hours, everybody has to be prepared to be on their own. They may have something available, but they may not. So whether you've got a small business or a medium-sized or larger business, you have to have provisions in place to help yourself. And pandemics and so on, people think, well, we're all in the same kind of situation. Really, that's not the case. You can quantify the impact of pandemic really specifically for your organization. You could say, hey, we have got a lot of family sort of oriented staff that would be impacted heavily by schools being closed. Whereas if you have a lot of, I don't know, Gen Y, Gen Z, I think they're called now, clearly not my generation, but a lot of sort of younger people, they may be quite happy to, to come to the office even if there's a pandemic, because if they're safe and if they can be segregated in terms of their seating, they may be quite happy to work there and they don't have the problem of having children out of school in their homes. So they're the sort of things to assess beforehand before you, have to activate your plans. Those surprises you really don't want to see when the actual issue happens. Yeah, so that's some ideas there, and also other mistakes and misconceptions is it's all about the backups and the systems running somewhere else. Really, the most predictable and easy things to test are the systems and the backups. The real difficulty comes in when we have to test people's behavior, or when we actually observe them in real disasters, how they're going to respond, who's making decisions, who knows what to do, who to call, where to go. They're the sort of things that are really the challenges in real life situations that are happening. And the actual things like recovering a system or restoring data, whilst we have a lot of technical challenges with that, especially restoring things from tape or something like that, I've seen a lot of challenges with that. The problem is the people side is actually the far less tested aspect. So if people are actually emotionally and mentally and really prepared and equipped with the right tools to activate the plan, and if they know what decisions to make if the boss is not there, for example. So that's the sort of things that we would include more in our plans and in our testing instead of just the backups. There's a few questions, whether you get the slides of the presentation. Further in this presentation, there will be some real intellectual property that we normally don't externally share except for face-to-face presentations or training courses. So whilst I'm super happy to share key information to people who really need it and who can benefit from this, because that's what it's all about, right? We're changing the world with all of us together. I would like to share that with you, but if it would be possible to message me at the end of the conversation or hook me up on LinkedIn, then we can have a quick chat and say, hey, which slides would you need? Which pictures do you want to use? That would be preferred. I apologize if that creates problems for people, but if, yeah, we've been sort of stuck with a situation before where our intellectual property, it disappeared in other corners. So hopefully you're okay with that. So that answers a few questions from Roger and a few other people who were asking. Okay, well, let's move on. A few definitions when it comes to IT, service continuity and business continuity and so on. Service continuity management inspired by ITIL, I would describe like the process responsible for managing risks that could seriously impact on IT services. So ITSM ensures that the IT service provider can always provide minimum agreed service level by reducing risk to an acceptable level and planning for the recovery of IT services. It should be designed to support business continuity management. So it's like a subset of business continuity management. And as you can see here, some of the keywords are acceptable level. Now, they're the things to discuss beforehand. We have a lot of trouble even finding what is acceptable levels, what are the time-critical services, what are the real business-critical activities in a business. We have trouble determining and agreeing that before any disaster, let alone when an issue happens, when you're in a disrupted situation. You don't want to do your priority checks then. You don't want to agree then what should come up first and what is the most critical and what is the acceptable level of downtime. So that's the idea of doing the planning beforehand. Often we see the opposite though, unfortunately. Okay, a few definitions further are DR. So you can see here disaster recovery, activities and programs designed to return the organization to an acceptable condition following a disaster. Now, some of you might start getting a bit of a feeling like, hey, this is a bit old-fashioned because, you know, these days we don't really have that up or down situation anymore. We have active systems, we've got things that are more resilient, continuity of service is the key word. Disaster recovery assumes that something is completely down and we're going to bring it back up. So it's the old ITIL term, but it's what was the description at the time. Then we also have another term, which is the process, policies, and procedures related to preparing for recovery of technology infrastructure critical to an organization after a natural or human-induced disaster. So that's more inspired by the ISO standard. It tends to have a technical IT connotation, but that's not always actually correct. Most organizations would say, hey, this doesn't have to be just IT. It could be our desks, our phones, our seats, our paper-based documents, all that kind of thing. That could also be disaster recovery in terms of recovering those services. Okay, a couple of slides that sort of show the relationships. So you've got here the BCM, the Business Continuity Management Process, end-to-end. Within that, you've got your documented procedures. Then within that, you might have some disaster recovery procedures, which is a subset of BCP, as I said before. And then IT Service Continuity Management kind of sits across DR and BCP, we normally find. So it does look at business requirements, which is the BCP kind of linkage, but it also looks only at IT services. So within the rest of the DR bubble would have things like I said, desks, phones, seats, fax machines, transport of staff, things like that. So it's a bit of a conceptual picture that you got here. Okay. The relationships, if we look at that highlighted what I just was trying to explain, the non-IT related resources, so the desk to hard copy documents, they're sitting in that pink segment, and then in this pink segment you might have non-IT related BCP aspects like manual workarounds, backup staff, alternate supply arrangements, MOUs, memorandums of understanding regarding work area recovery, those sorts of procedures. They're not maybe not IT services, but they're still part of BCP. So IT is not the same as BCP-DR. That's what I'm trying to explain. Still, you might say this is completely clear, but many people still make that mistake. They think IT should write the BCP for the whole business, and that's clearly not the case. So let's have a little look here at the next slide. You can see a picture that shows the cause and effect. Now, this is sort of showing that IT service continuity plans can be seen as the IT department's own BCP. So DR is more about the servers and the applications and the data, whilst IT service continuity actually touches a lot also on IT staff, the building where IT is working from, the tools that IT staff might need to recover or continue their work in a disaster. For example, Confluence or SharePoint sites or things like that where they can find their procedures. So you can see here in this little map, the causes being staff, building, IT, voice, third-party suppliers, and also the effect being loss of staff, loss of building, loss of IT, loss of voice, loss of third-party supplier. And then BCP tends to cover the whole gamut, the whole picture. Now, ITDR tends to focus just on something that's disrupted that is a technical reason, like a cause, and also it impacts just on the IT. So it's servers being up or down, it's restoring data that's corrupted, that kind of picture. And then we've got the service continuity plan, which really start touching on, in the philosophy of ITIL and COVID, it would start looking at, hey, the cause could also be your IT staff not being around, or your IT-related buildings not being there, or your voice communication being disrupted and IT staff can't contact each other, and the third-party supplier in IT being down. So you start seeing that between BCP and DR, there is a bit of a crossover, and that is the service continuity plan. Now, in this picture, you can see in the real world these days is voice and data communications. So IT and voice recovery, they tend to be managed more and more often by the same people or by the same departments. So where you can see our previous slide focusing on just each item individually in the service continuity plan, here we could say some organizations, they actually see the IT and the voice as a combined planning exercise. So I'm sure you guys would have seen that in your organizations as well. Now, this is a really old picture, but they actually really, the British Standard, they actually pictured it really, really well in terms of the continuity of ICT versus the business. And what they basically said in that picture was the understanding of the organization on the bottom left slide. And then let me just grab my arrow. So over here, the understanding of the organization is part of your business continuity activities. Then determining BCP options could include manual workarounds and things like that. Developing and implementing a BCP response, so having provisions in place. And then exercising, maintaining, and reviewing your BCP or business continuity environment. Now, the touch point is where we start saying, hey, we know what we need in this organization. We know what our BCP options are. But what is in between is actually understanding the ICT requirements. So the business also has to think about their own manual workarounds, for example, which fits in the bottom left circle, but they also need at some stage some more automated solutions. Now that's where the touch point is with your ICT circle, which is then determining ICT continuity strategies, developing and implementing ICT continuity response, and exercising, testing, maintaining, and reviewing, and so on. So it's that sort of touch point between those two circles. All right. I'm clicking through. Sorry, just one moment. So in practice, how do IT, DR, and service continuity processes fit in the overall BCM process? Now, we're going to touch on that topic in a second, but my question is, what is your biggest BCP frustration? Now, we're going to do a little poll again. I see many, many people doing even service continuity planning, either BCP or service continuity. What is your biggest frustration? Is it number one, too hard to maintain, too many pages, etc.? Is it number two, we have no idea if it will work in practice, it's untested, it will be a big surprise on the day? Or is it our people may not be available or capable? You know, our people basically are going to be unpredictable in this particular picture. Now, I should have said the last one is all of the above. So maybe that would be for the next webinar, but I would say, yeah, if you can please answer this poll and just click on one of them that springs to mind mostly. Is it that the plan's too big, so it's too hard to maintain? Is it you don't know if it's been tested properly or you can't get the buy-in for testing? Or is it that your people may not be available or capable in that sort of incident situation? I'm going to flick to the next couple of slides. So while you're answering that, it would be great to hear from all of you. So this is our best practice model for business continuity management. It's got 8 steps. They're very, very simple steps. It's conceptual. we try to stay away too much from too much black text on white paper. We try to use some pictures, especially with senior management teams. We find actually the simpler the picture, the more effective. If it's too much text and too much paper-based documentation, we find that they pass it down the line and they're not actually going to get to read it themselves or to really have a conversation about the different stages of the process. So we can see here, you know, the 8 steps being the business continuity objectives, so setting the right goals for business continuity, risk management, then business continuity teams or who to involve. Number 4 is then finding out what is critical in your business, what BAU, business as usual processes do you have that are time sensitive. The next step being impact analysis, then continuity provisions that you then can invest in as a result, and then step 7 being your activation toolkit, and step 8 is your test rehearsals and training and awareness programs. And then in the middle, you've got your maintenance and continual improvement. So you can see here the sort of best practice model, and it's got an iterative aspect. So you actually go through the motion multiple times. In best practice situations, we find that more than 3 to 6 months to do the entire wheel is a pretty bad idea, because if you sit too much on one step, like BIA, I've seen people do that for a year or 18 months. Now the rest of the organization gets bored. They're basically acknowledging that the business has changed in that period so much, it's really not relevant anymore. It's hard for people to be inspired for something that has to wait for so long to show some results in a real-life test, for example. So the whole picture of the wheel, try and do it in sort of a 3-month period, whether you do it for the whole business or for your IT department if you're in IT. Because even for IT, you can implement this entire process, because you've got people, you've got buildings, you've got services, you've got buildings and transport requirements and so on. So they're the sort of things to keep in mind. The timing is quite important. Now, we got some results here from our poll. Too many pages, too hard to maintain. Now, let's see what the bar graph is. I can see about 20% of people saying that would be the problem. Now, then the next one, 21% actually, no idea if it will work in practice, 28%. So that's actually the untested situation. And then people may not be available to play their role, 23%. So very common, these 3 answers obviously across all of you guys. And thanks for answering that, for giving us some feedback on that, because the framework I'm going to show you in the next 10 or 15 minutes is going to touch on all of those different problems. Just try and overcome them. Okay. Now, I'm going to highlight some of the steps of this wheel so that you get some practical ideas on how you could document this. Let me read this question from Murray. Does a combination of active-active, mobility, and work from home address some of these traditional risks while creating some new ones? Well, absolutely. That is a very, very good question. Now, this particular situation, we find people put all their eggs in one basket. They think, we've got active-active, or we've got everything in the cloud. We'll just work from home. They actually we find that people don't test these types of solutions, especially work from home, en masse with a large group of people in the organization for an extensive period of time. So people might be working from home 1 day a month and only a few people in the organization, but who really tests that end-to-end process for a longer period? So you will find people-related, productivity-related, connectivity-related, technology as in system capacity-related issues, and security-related issues potentially if people are using the wrong Wi-Fi networks and so on to connect. So that would be a mobility issue, for example, work from home. And in terms of cloud, I mean, people have this magic feeling that, cloud is the BCP answer to everything. Well, that's not quite the case, because you actually attract a whole bunch of different risks, like what Murray was saying, you know, while creating some new risks, things like having to have connectivity. So whilst in the past people were productive with maybe just a server in their own little building or in their data center, they could still be productive emailing each other, for example, amongst staff, or they could still run a payroll or something like that if that system was hosted internally. Now with cloud, we find that, actually, we now need so badly Wi-Fi or network internet connectivity, otherwise we're basically completely down and we can't be productive at all. So that's the problem. You know, people have these false sense of security of certain solutions, and they don't look at the flip side. Yeah, I believe that many of these solutions don't have one side; they always have other risks that they attract. So that's a very good question for sure. Okay, another comment from Karen was, now we're getting to the heart of the benefits, competitive advantage and reputation for service excellence. Really agree with that. While we're doing BCP, we actually should think, what's the purpose? Not just getting the services up and running for a couple of clients. It's actually the whole of business, thinking about corporate social responsibility to your own staff and so on, and to your own supply chain. Like if I'm a big supermarket chain, if I'm down, that means a lot of smaller suppliers, a lot of smaller providers of products and so on, they will also be affected. So it's really that end-to-end picture we have to keep in mind. Okay, so risk management. Let's have a look at some of these slides. You can see here why are IT service continuity and IT security related issues integrated. How can they be integrated in your BCP? Well, for example, in the scenario of building downtime, could be related to terrorist attack, and terrorists are more and more using technology to perform their attacks. So IT and business continuity are getting more and more integrated. Another example is IT systems could be down as one of your causes of a BCP event. Well, it could be caused by virus attacks, hacking, and so on. So these are some examples of how you can map these things out. I'm just going to flick back to the previous slide here where you can see the structure of this risk matrix, which is consequence scenarios, and they're really the ones that we will use for planning our business continuity. And then some other columns related to impact, relevant incidents, pre-incident controls, post-incident response procedures, as you can see these different columns here. But they're detailed procedures for each incident. Now, the actual overall process of business continuity, we're actually quite happy to start with this level, the consequence scenarios. And it really makes it a lot easier for business areas to answer the question, what would you do if your staff are not available or if your building is affected? They're much easier to answer than what would you do if there is a hostage situation or a short-term illness of a part of the workforce or theft of equipment. It's much easier to work with business departments to get them to answer in BIA type exercises. What will they do if there's an impact on people, on buildings, and in the next slides you can see here on IT and on other miscellaneous, could be other voice communication, for example. So there's only 4 or 5 different scenarios we often use when we do this kind of exercise. We use the core consequence scenarios of loss of people, loss of buildings or facilities or accessibility of those. The third one is being loss of IT. And the fourth one, loss of voice communication. We keep that as a separate one because it's a separate capability. And we actually feel that reputation can still be maintained if you can still talk to customers. Even though the technology may be very similar to your IT-related technologies like VoIP and so on, we think, if you can still talk to customers, it still maintains reputation. And then the fifth one is loss of external vendor or supplier. But there are 5 core consequence scenarios that we often use in organizations. And we're getting a question here, does a combination of a question here from Nata is, why are they color-coded? We normally have a system of rating, and you'll find that in many risk management methods. The risk assessment here includes the overall impact level and then some sort of likelihood level. And these two you can rate and then multiply, for example, or summarize. And based on the results, you can then color code. It just gives an even spread, ideally, of the things that you're doing quite well, the things that are not going well at all, the red ones, and the middle ones being the yellow means, okay, we're actually doing sort of a little bit of work, but we should do some more. So it's the red, amber, green traffic light type system. Yes, I hope that explains your question. It's for senior management to be able to invest in the red hot buttons and not feeling that everything's red or everything's green. It's a good way to at least prioritize some of these and that they know what they're investing in and get the buy-in for that. Okay, here's some more examples of IT or technology-related issues. You could have fraud, financial damages, threat of competition, espionage. All of these could have a technology component. So it's important to include IT-related or IT service continuity in that big scope of business continuity planning. Okay, another step I wanted to highlight as an example is step 3, your business continuity teams. So how does IT fit in there? Well, we have a damage assessment team normally, which is assessing the damage in the situation of an incident. Could be damage to people. So part of your workforce might be sick or something. It could be damage to systems. Could be, you know, your applications or your servers or your data could be affected. Now, those sorts of, let me just flip back, sorry, just give me a second. Damage assessment could be all those different things. Now, one of those damage assessment activities would be what's the damage to IT. Another one could be damage to facilities or security-related damage. So they're the sort of things you would do in that damage assessment team as a first point of call, the eyes and ears of a disaster. And often in there, you would have representation from IT. Another area where you would have IT represented is the System Recovery and Support Team, so the SRST as we would call it. And again, that is the people who recover the IT systems, who restore data, who support those systems in the disaster situation while users are potentially working from home or while they're located at the disaster recovery site. They're the sort of things that IT people get involved in. So you can see that team over here. Now, there's other areas in business continuity where IT staff get involved. You might find them sort of represented in your crisis management team at some level, but what we often find is damage assessment. Those people, once they've done the damage, they usually join in with the crisis management team to make further decisions. So it's not that exclusive, it's just that these are the eyes and ears of a disaster on site where something is going on. And the crisis management team could be located anywhere in any boardroom to start making decisions, make calls, and so on. Okay, another example, your BIA, Business Impact Analysis. Now, what I'd like to show you is one of the most important pieces of documentation, and I talked about intellectual property earlier. You guys are obviously able to see this, and please give us feedback on it. If you want to use some of these frameworks, please let us know. Please let us help you, and let me personally also give you some guidance if needed. You're most welcome to contact me on LinkedIn and to ask any questions. The benefit is my first name and surname doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. You'll find me on LinkedIn. It's a very strange name, and it's at the end of the slide, so I've got that in there. So, okay, the BCP on the page, the structure of that is, on the top you have the consequence scenarios that we talked about, so loss of staff, loss of buildings, loss of IT, loss of voice communication, loss of external environment. And then here you've got your time-critical processes. So some of them are no matter when, and some of them are only certain times of the month or year or week. Now, time-critical processes, we're looking for end-to-end, which might be, for example, responding to phone inquiries as a business, or order processing and delivery, and then paying staff and long-term contractors. That may be your end-to-end processes you identified as an organization. Now, what we then have is in each of these boxes or crossings, you can see here a value in time, which we call the maximum tolerable period of disruption. And here, a description that goes with that, which is your initial workaround. Now, the benefit of that is that you're going to have documented properly what people should be doing first. So the business departments, various departments that could be contributed to that particular box, they would have to think about what would we do initially when we don't have the automated luxury provisions in place yet. And once they write them down, I find that it's actually more common that they also find that MTPD, or tolerable period of disruption, like 2 weeks, is actually stretched a bit. Once they start rehearsing and writing these things down, they start getting a feeling of, hey, we could actually work with this workaround quite an extensive period of time. And then you can see over that period, it might be just a particular continuity provision that requires more automated solutions or more recovery effort and so on. Now, ideally in this map, which we call the BCP on the page, we're very proud of this map. It's taken us 12 years to develop. And the benefit is in one place, all your detailed departmental plans and all that detail that sits in all these departments, including IT, which senior people or real junior people are unable to digest, we find if you make a one-page BCP that includes, at least in layman's terms, what that strategy is, for all those scenarios up the top and for all those processes here, you actually find a lot of information in one place. It's really, really beneficial to do that. Now, behind all of these boxes, you could have detail, like I said, in detailed IT recovery procedures, in departmental plans, and all those sorts of documents. And people, if they're interested, can click on that. But initially, it's nice to have a one-page map that shows how the whole business continuity plan really hangs together. So hopefully that gives you a bit of insight there. We're going to run through an example now of that map. And that is the following one, where we say, the payroll process here. We have the scenario being IT is down. Okay. So a certain MTPD here, up to 4 weeks, they say the manual workaround is we contact the bank and request reprocessing of the last month, manually fix discrepancies using internet banking from home. Great, okay, simple description. Now over that period, we would like to have activated DR systems and process any backlog. So this is really, really interesting because that creates a lot of leadway for IT people if business has documented this particular workaround properly. If they know what we're doing in the first 4 weeks, that means that IT will have some leadway before they have to come up with that solution. Yeah, some questions about the intellectual property. Let's chat about that at the end of the webinar and what we can do for you guys to get at least some of these pictures. Like I said, this is the main part of our intellectual property, and whilst you're here, I'd love you to get a feel for it. But there's the whole set of slides. We can control a little bit who's getting all that information. That would be great. Okay, step 6 is about continuity provision. So that is, once you know your requirements, you can then map out per time frame, for example, a number of, let's say, 2 days, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and over 4 weeks, if that was your time frames in the previous step. That means you can then say which provisions, as in which applications, data, and so on, is needed by all these different departments that are listed here, and how many people in each department need that service or that application or provision in that period of time. Now, I hope I can get you guys to digest this, because what it means, if you've agreed this up front, that means IT and facilities people can go, aha, the first couple of days, or maybe you have 4 hours, it doesn't matter, whatever the time frame is, the first, let's say, 1 day or 2 days, that means, aha, this department of, let's say, sales, they don't need anything. But this department, call center, they need 5 people accessing a comfortable seating, desk space to work from anywhere, from home. Aha. Now that's going to give a real benefit, like a prioritized recovery framework or checklist for IT and facilities people. It's really going to give them a lot of time. Okay, thanks for your comments so far. Got some comments from Melissa here. What are your biggest risks if you maintain dual office operations where one location is also your BCP site? Very good question. Now, my answer to that is the biggest risk is not having tested who will vacate at the other end. Because it seems great, right? Oh, one site's down, we'll go to the other building in the city or whatever outside the city, and we'll turn up there with half the staff who are critical. Well, at the other end, some people have to vacate. I hope that answers your question, Melissa. That's one thing that springs to mind. There's other things you have to keep in mind, but that's one that I can think about. Now, Jerry is asking here, just an observation for future delivery with the polls. I think that was a question to the host of the webinar. We'll keep that in mind for next time. Should an organization have corporate BCP and departmental plans? That is a question from Suresh. We would say as much as possible you want in the common corporate plan, like your risk matrix and things like that, would be ideal to have that only in one place and make your department plans as short and skinny as possible, because otherwise you're going to get lots and lots of duplication in those departmental plans. So I would really recommend you looking at that and to say, what is generic here in this organization and what can we pull out into our corporate level plan? Okay, moving on. This is just a snapshot of a BCP activation toolkit. Just want to show you that we use lots of pictures and bubbles and clickable items where people can actually click on these bits, and in time they can find the right items. So, for example, the first sort of stage items they might need versus the plan activation stages, and then phase 3, or phase 2 and 3, you find the full recovery and resumption techniques that they need. So that's hopefully going to answer some people's questions on how to document this. We really believe in simple, easy to maintain little snippets of information. Okay, just moving to click a few items that also IT would have involvement in. As you can see here, the internal contact list, team responsibilities, crisis control room setup. You find that there's an IT aspect in there. So the integration, hopefully, you can see IT is integrated in the whole BCP. There are just some examples here. All right, I'll answer some of the questions in a minute. This is a snapshot, and you can definitely email me if you want this particular template. This is how to document IT system recovery procedures. You can find especially things like how to recover the system, but not just that, also looking at what are the particular steps and the activation of the process when it really happens. We find a lot of recovery procedures are very hard to maintain, very, very big. Yeah, we like the toolkit approach. Some of these things you need the detail, but I'd like templates for that and having each system using the same template. Final step, tests, rehearsals, training and awareness programs. Well, we all know that, that includes a lot of IT activities. We believe that the people side should also be tested extensively though. So it's not just you're testing your servers and your applications, it's really about the people that are involved as well. So as long as you see yourself within IT also being part of the business, that would be the ideal situation. Okay, and then maintenance and continual improvement, that's where many auditors come in, making sure people don't get their things out of date. The PDCA model is behind some of the work that we do. Plan, do, check, act. I'm assuming most people would know that Deming wheel, you know, the stopper being audit really, or your, your assessments of your process, you know, and then having your quality control of plan, do, check, act as a bit of an upward rolling ball. So that's how the picture works. Key differences of our approach with the traditional one is obviously having internal capacity building, so really get a hands-on team capable of activating the plan, not just one individual, not just a single point of success being your DR manager or your BCP manager. Dynamic framework you can see here, so it's not collecting dust on the shelf, consequence-based planning like the 5 scenarios, catering for fatigue and unavailability, top-down approach of processes, as I mentioned before, business end-to-end processes, and then breaking it into which departments are involved. Strong focus on comms and notification, color-coded matrix-style documents, including that BCP on the page, hyperlinking and utilizing what's already there, don't duplicate, and toolkit approach. Some people are commenting, nice, toolkit. Yeah, that's definitely something that helps. And then you find using agreed manual workarounds and documenting them, and overall prioritization focus of the whole process. But you don't get the luxury. Okay, the next couple of slides. Yeah, business continuity, it's a bit like running from the bear. You don't have to be faster than the bear, just be faster than everybody else. In large-scale disasters, we find that is actually the case, but in smaller-scale things that are local, you don't have that luxury. People will expect you to have a plan. So that's always a funny one. Now, IT management frameworks, I've added these slides just for some people to know there's ITIL, which has service continuity management. And these slides I'm very happy to share, actually. Maybe we can send them out to people afterwards. I'll talk to Chris from the central office of IIA and see what we can disseminate here, because a lot of you guys are asking about that, so we'll see what we can include in there. You can see here a few other highlights. Sorry, let me just bring that back. So IT services and recovery and what you can measure in terms of performance, in terms of ITIL, service continuity. Another process is DSS4, which is COBIT. You can look that up. It's COBIT 4.1 and COBIT 5. They both mention service continuity. And then you find here the website of ISACA, which has some of those frameworks freely available. You know, the COVID framework, you can look it up and see your continuity processes. ISO 20000, becoming a little bit less common in my experience, but it was the first international standard for IT service management, so it also included comments on continuity. Benchmarking and audit frameworks. I'm just skipping through these a little bit faster because I think the BCP topic will seem to be of more interest to most of you. Auditing your benchmarking your IT disaster recovery plans. You have different test types, as you know, inquire, inspect, observe, reperform. They're the sort of things to keep in mind. And then your risk and control analysis, so being selective by first looking at what are the key risks that came out of your step 2, which I showed earlier, that will determine what you're going to focus on. Maturity ratings, you can use obviously your CMM, capability maturity model, if you're doing that. Oh, and then you've got the detailed test procedures, for example, your testing and exercising of the, oh, sorry, I'm doing something silly here, the detailed test procedures of your testing in terms of your continuity. You could have control objectives, just like COVID would structure it. Control objectives, then testing the control design. The next thing would be to test the outcomes of control objectives and then testing the impact of control weaknesses. So these sort of structures you can apply on BCP, but also apply it to your service continuity. And then the test results are in a report like this. Maturity scores, you can use the bar charts based on each of the steps of the wheel. You can have your target based on CMM and so on. And then audit issues, we have some examples here on how you can chart that out, high, medium. I mean, these are just common things for auditors. I thought I'd put them in the back of the slide deck. Okay, now we're at the end of the slides. I'm going to look at a couple of questions. I'm looking at the time here. The department's making often assumptions about their priority use of BC sites, and unless assured centrally, they can be oversubscriptions. Completely agreed. You have to agree this stuff up front and really make it a joint decision on who's going to get what. The toolkit we talked about, can job titles be stated in it, in IT disaster plan instead of actual names? Yeah, but in the contact lists and in responsibilities, you do want names eventually, and then first and second alternate. That's our best practice. So otherwise, if it becomes just roles, people don't actually know who to call. So it's a bit of a mix and match of roles versus names. Then Michael, the Suresh is saying, what's the general time frame for development of BIA and BCP? The end-to-end BCP, I would say as best practice, 3 to 6 months. BIA is one step in there. I would say 4 to 6 weeks. Don't go into the 18-month BIAs. People will be completely drained. They'll be bored. They won't want to do it. And then we've got here the frequency of BC rehearsals. For non-IT, we see it usually every 6 to 12 months. Okay, you can see here some of the training that is coming up that we're running. We do a lot of information security, supply chain security, risk management, and BCM courses. The website is businessasusual.net.au. So you could have a look at that for the training programs, and we have a special offer for IIA members. This is my LinkedIn profile. You can see a heap of articles in multiple languages, not quite in Icelandic language. I'm not sure if they speak English, but we have Spanish and English as the key languages for all the articles that we publish. I put them on my LinkedIn profile, but I've got freelance consultants who contribute to many of these articles based on their skill sets. So I hope you can benefit from those. They're freely available. I hope you enjoy them. And you can see my name there, so please connect with me on LinkedIn. If you need anything specifically, please feel free to connect, ask for specific slides, and I'm going to talk to the IIA of some of the things that we can share. Thank you for your comments. Sorry, we ran a bit out of time, but I always get too excited, I think, about this topic. So hopefully that helped some of you, and thank you for the thank yous. I'm going to hand back over to Michael to close the session and to tell us what to do next. Thanks, everyone.
Rinska, thank you very much. Thank you for presenting today. Definitely well received. Very, very, very informative. A lot of interest here. That's great to see. Thanks for everyone's comments, the questions that have come through. Thanks for the thank you. It's always great to see. When we close this session down, you can simply click the X in the top right-hand corner. It'll take you to a feedback form. Please take the time to fill that in. Great feedback for Rinska and also great feedback for the Institute of Internal Auditors as well. If I'm not mistaken, this is the last webinar for the Institute of Internal Auditors for 2016. So we probably won't see each other till next year. So do keep an eye out for those webinars that will be coming through. Keep an eye out that on the Institute of Internal Auditors website. All the best for the silly season that's about to come up. If you're having a break, have a safe time, and we'll see you next year. Thanks a lot, everyone. See ya.